Citizens of the world, welcome back to another Keep Yours podcast where we try and keep a few extra dollars in your wallet and give you some financial education. And today, we're going to talk about all positive things in the world, which is an exciting trend from the usual morass of what we've got going on. And today, what we are talking about is the 10 global trends that every smart person should know. And you could call this a book review, a book report, but this is the book. And I just got it this last week, and it is fantastic. And I agree with them completely. Every person needs to know this. Not only that, the reason that I'm doing a podcast on this is because I believe we all have an obligation to share this information because what's in here is both exciting in terms of human progress. It's compelling in terms of all of the things we've done to help each other. And it's very relevant in terms of where we're at right now in the world and the choices we're going to make in the future and what brings prosperity and what doesn't. And so much of what this book talks about is the prosperity that's happened in the world. And it's undeniable and it's fascinating. And if you, I can't recommend enough. Get this book, read it. It's easy to go through. I'll show you some of the content in here, some of the graphs that they've got that are great. And really, it's just such a perfect place for gaining some insight into globally how much better the world is and what's got it there. And what's got it there is very, very important as well. All right, so let's start with this. The world's getting better, right? We think that the world's getting worse. 58% of people in 17 countries who were surveyed in 2016 thought the world is either getting worse or staying the same. And Americans are even more cynical. 65% of us think the world is getting worse, and only 6% think it's getting better. Uncontroversial data on major global trends. This is what is really going on in the world, and it's fascinating to go through. So I hope you embark on this journey with me to learn a little bit more about how good things really are. And unfortunately, and I put myself in this category too, Americans were pretty glum. And I blame this mostly on our media because that's what we get. If it bleeds, it leads. And we get terrible news all the time, and we don't get a lot of the good news of what's going on in the world. And we also don't get to, let's say, acknowledge and realize how much America has played into this prosperity, this global prosperity. So for the first and most important thing is poverty is in massive decline. Even though the population continues to increase, natural resources are becoming cheaper, the global absolute poverty rate has fallen from 42% of people in 1981 to 8.6 today. In my lifetime, we have gone from 4 out of 10 people being poor to less than 8 out of 100. So 42 out of 100 were poor in 1981. And I mean, we're talking under the poverty rate, which I think is like $2 a day. And this is just amazing. Life expectancy has more than doubled since 1900. Amazing. So we're living longer, we're more prosperous, things are cheaper. The world is abundant. I mean, this truly plays into the world is abundant, and we need to know that. So this is from the authors of this book, and this is what they write, and this is straight off of their website. That's where I grabbed all 3 of these initial quotes, just straight from their website. So they say you can't fix what's wrong in the world today if you don't know what's actually happening. So this is a solution for that. Understand what's happening, and then we still have more to do. We still have, we still can improve. We can all do better. But we got to acknowledge how good it is and all of the things that have brought prosperity so we can bring more of it. And I love all the ideas behind that. All right. And importantly, we need to understand the why. So the why is, to me, such a fascinating question that when we look into that, it gives us the roadmap for what to do going forward. So the world economy has grown more than 100 times over the past 200 years. This is the prosperity brought about by the Industrial Revolution and the technological revolutions that we've had over the last 200 years. And that has expanded world economic growth, i.e., prosperity. Free markets and the rule of law have spread along with international trade. And that has allowed prosperity to transcend not just in first world countries, but across the globe. So, since the Industrial Revolution, the line is basically straight up. And I'm going to pull that graph up here and show it to you so you can see it. And this is what it looks like. And it is truly straight up, a straight up line for the last 100 years in terms of world growth in gross domestic product. And this is easy to understand because even as late as 1900, we had 42% of people in America working on farms. Now it's 2%. So we're all now employed in things that bring greater prosperity. We're all fed, otherwise more people would still have to work on farms. And therefore, we can all get on with doing better things for all of us. Percentage of people living in global extreme poverty fell from 42% to 8.6% in the last 20 years. Why? Because increases in output in industrialized nations allows for the prosperity of all humanity. The only hunger that now exists in the world is out of political want versus a lack of resources. We can feed everyone. Anyone not getting food is typically because their government won't allow us to bring in food. And countries that come to mind like that are North Korea and some African countries that are run by dictators. So they talk about resources and population. So not only are we not running out of resources, we have more resources are available now. They're also at lower prices than they've ever been. And that is because over the last 30 years, our technology has increased. That technology has allowed us to get at additional resources. So it used to be that if there was a vein of coal or gold or silver or uranium or copper that we wanted to get out of the ground, before, if that stream was running through the middle of the mountain, we'd take out the whole mountain. Well, now we can just go take out that stream. So we're producing less pollution than we used to. And we get the actual commodity we want with less effort, which makes them cheaper. Fracking is a perfect example of how oil and gas become a lot cheaper in the United States because the technology has improved, and therefore we get cheaper resources. Right? As our technology and innovation grow, this also allows us to utilize our resources more effectively. So if we look at chip technology, right? A computer used to fill a room. Now we walk around with a supercomputer in our pocket as a smartphone. And the amount of resources required to make that smartphone into all of the technology in a smartphone. So think of the size of a smartphone now. And that used to be a digital camera, a whole phone that was in a box, a computer that took up a room, and the amount of materials required to make all of those things versus the smaller amount of materials to create an iPhone. So we're using less resources as our technology grows. And that's great for all of us, less waste. Peak population. Global trends are that we're having fewer children, which is good for the planet. Peak population will be around 2080 later this century, and then start declining, which is good for everyone, good for the planet. And the people who are alive have more prosperity because of that. We also have lower child mortality rates, increased urbanization, i.e. people living in cities, and that's a good thing because that lowers carbon footprint. We have rising global income. We have the spread of political and economic freedom, which all actually strongly correlate to people having fewer children, right? But more educated children. Right? You needed to have more children when child mortality rates were higher and everyone needed to work on the farm and you needed workers. But now we don't need as many people working on the farm, and we don't need as many children. And that's great for the planet. Another thing is global expansion of reproductive freedom. We now get to choose not just how many children we have, but when we have them. And that's liberating to a lot of people. Famine is gone, right? There was a book that they reference in here a couple times that said, we were going to hit this peak population and there was going to be great starvation, and that we wouldn't have enough resources and food for everybody. But in fact, the opposite's happened, right? Agricultural productivity has improved. We've got better science for fertilizer, pesticides, and higher yield crops. And that's also made crops a lot cheaper. That's made people's expense over how much they have to spend at the grocery store less. Oh yeah, the 1968 book, The Population Bomb, Paul Ehrlich from Stanford University said, in the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any crash programs embarked upon now. Basically, the prediction was too many people, not enough resources, peak population will be peak starvation. Instead, we have the opposite. We have no famine in the world anymore. How amazing is that? So people aren't starving anymore. I remember growing up in the 1980s, the commercials were feed a child. $1 a day is all it takes to feed a child, to feed a starving child. Now we're feeding all the children. Now, not as well as we should. There's more to go. And there's food insecurity all over the place, and there doesn't need to be. But famine and starving by populations is over. And America has a history with famine. A lot of the Irish came to America because of the Great Potato Famines. So there is a history of populations having to move and immigrate because of famine. But the world has grown richer, and people can afford more food, and that stimulated production of food because people can get rewarded for growing the food that people want to buy, and we can ship it. So why? What's the whys of how we've gotten to more food? Democracy and free press make governments more accountable, make food supply known. Global trade means we can ship food all over the world wherever it's needed, from markets who create a surplus to markets that aren't creating enough. And not only that, I mean, when they talk about the end of famine, what's really amazing in here is the calories per person per day that's being made in even sub-Saharan Africa. And the places where we thought, food's not, we're not going to be able to grow more crops there, but we are. It's really amazing. Now, at the same time that we're getting more crop production, there's more land being set aside for nature. This is a great thing. The global tree canopy increased by 2.24 million square kilometers between 1982 and 2016. While we are losing some of the rainforests in South America and in Africa, that's more than being covered by the additional growth in North America and Northern Europe and Northern Asia and Russia, or what are the Russian bloc countries. And again, this goes back to our improvements in productivity for crop growth means less land is needed to grow crops, which means more land is available to return to its natural state and grow trees. And there's more and more trees growing. And those trees are then soaking up the CO2 in the atmosphere that we've released from global CO2 levels increasing because of our fossil fuels. So global CO2 levels might actually start reversing because we've got more land for nature. People are also moving to cities, and that reduces the rural footprint of mankind, which means we've got more place to grow trees instead of having people's houses in rural parts. So cities continuing to grow is actually a major factor in contributing to all of this prosperity. And one of the major reasons is that cities are centers for innovation and growth, and they're home to the richest part of the population. I mean, if you look at the cities in the world and how much wealth is concentrated in those. Take Hong Kong and Tokyo and Paris, London, New York City, although New York City's on the down a little bit right now because of the pandemic, but still, overall, the major cities in the United States are growing and bringing more and more prosperity. There's more jobs there. And that's where the innovation is created that's helping all of humanity. Urbanization is great for the environment. It reduces the carbon footprint per person. No doubt about that. Now, why is this allowed to happen? Again, the improvements in agriculture and better paying jobs in cities. Another of their top 10 trends that you need to know about if you're a smart person, democracy is still actually growing. Now, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, democracy has been expanding at a pretty heavy pace. And that's not to say that there are not still autocracies in the world. They are. There are fewer of them, but we hear more about them, which is why we have our pessimism. We hear about Erdogan in Turkey taking power away. We know about Venezuela and how bad it's been there. We know that Argentina has been bad. We know that North Korea is awful. But what about the rest of the world? More and more democracies, right? Freedom globally is still increasing. Why? Because of free markets, which raise prosperity levels for everyone. And in fact, so much so that even China, who's still ruled by one guy, Xi, has opened itself up because they realize that free markets work, that free markets bring prosperity, that free markets where people get to decide what they want to buy with their money. And that determines what's made in the marketplace. That's good for everybody across the board. And so China has adopted the free markets while at the same time still withholding some of the political control. But if you look at the trends of what's going on here, China is going to have a hard time innovating because of one of the things that's inherent in all of these things, and that's freedoms. Freedom is what's creating prosperity. And we'll talk about that more here in a minute. But let's get on with additional trends. So in addition to democracy growing, peace is more common than war now. We've had fewer and fewer wars over the last few years. And if America would stop fighting, then we'd have a lot less, even so. And if America would stop building arms to support the other wars, we'd have even fewer, such that if America was the leader that it should be, we could almost entirely eliminate war on this planet. We still hear about war, especially in the United States, and I think this is one of the reasons that people in the United States feel that things aren't as good as they should be. It's one of the reasons 65% of us view the world that it's gone negative. Right? Well, that's because we've been fighting a war in Afghanistan for 20 years. We've been fighting a war in Iraq effectively for 20 years. We're pseudo fighting this war in Yemen by providing the Saudis with all of these weapons so that they can fight it. We've got military operations in 300 countries that are kind of unnecessary as far as freedom, right? But peace is more common than war. Why? Because international trade has helped everyone prosper. And you don't exactly want to go kill your customer because then you don't have a customer for your goods. So they call it capitalist peace, where capitalism is creating peace. Let me repeat that. Capitalism is creating peace. And I'm not talking about crony capitalism. I'm talking about free markets with little or the minimum amount of government intervention, right? But this actually creates peace. Autocracies where one person can decide we're going to war, those create wars, not peace. In addition, we now have a safer world. Now, people are less likely to die from natural disasters. And why? Because our technology's increased our safety in buildings. We've got more time with warning systems before a tidal wave hits and nobody knows about it. And the growth in incomes means people are getting richer faster, and their property getting faster than their property is the rate at which property destruction is happening. Excuse me. So the world's gotten safer overall. Deaths from natural disasters are significantly reduced, way, way down. Now, could we increase safety in the world more? Yeah, absolutely. In the United States, we could significantly increase safety for everyone if we would eliminate our other wars, our wars on drugs, which are obviously lost, but which create a lot of violence because they're illegal. So that's just the first section of this book. And then they get into all sorts of additional stuff, people trends that are great, health trends that are improving, violence trends that are improving, work trends that are improving, natural resource trends that are improving, farm trends that are improving, technology trends that are improving everyone's life, and trends in the US that are improving everyone's life. And I'm going to go through some of those here quickly, but it's amazing of all of the improvements, and we hardly ever hear about that. So here are some people trends. Global happiness and global incomes are rising. Global inequality is falling with fewer people living in slums, right? Slums. We don't have a ton of those in America. We have a few ghettos remaining, and we've got some really bad parts of town, but not slums, not like in India or the favelas in Brazil. And fewer people are living in those, which is a really good thing. Women are being empowered and gaining more leadership roles in politics. Global literacy rates are rising. More children are in school and in school for longer. This is increasing global IQ, which is interesting that global IQ is improving, but these are trends every smart person should know and we're really not aware of. So while we're in school for longer and we have a higher IQ, we don't necessarily really know what's going on, as this is proven. But this is great. Means that things are better than we think. That's good news. I'm very excited about this. It's in many ways lifted a weight off my shoulders of feeling like we have destroyed this planet over the last 100 years, when really we haven't. Now, that's not to say that we're not making and creating pollution we could definitely improve upon. Absolutely, we are. I mean, plastics is a perfect example. Single-use plastics completely unnecessary, and we need to get rid of it. Standard sizing for glass and cardboard would help a lot. And let's stop putting so much advertising and packaging into things, and make it reusable, recyclable. And but the trend of less materials to get us the same technology, where now again you have a smartphone that's also including your camera. That's a computer, a telephone. And gives you access to all sorts of information via technology. That's fantastic. Additional people trends. Global free press is increasing, but with setbacks. Only 31% of countries have a free press, right? And this last year's been a tough one in terms of freedoms. A lot of freedoms have been suspended, removed, and we'll see if they come back. And even the United States, we're supposed to have this freedom of press, this freedom of speech. But if you speak out against things that are considered taboo right now, then we are losing that freedom of being able to say what we want. If you want some examples of that, the Hunter Biden computer story by the New York Post gets pulled off of Twitter, and they yank the New York Post's Twitter account. The President of the United States is not allowed on Twitter or Facebook. That's censorship. That's not freedom. So we've got some work to do there, but it's good globally that it's increasing. But we have a lot more way to go there, because that free press, that freedom of speech, that's got a lot to do with prosperity. Health trends overall, life expectancy globally rising. The global death rate is falling. Infant mortality is falling. Many vaccines are saving lives for polio and measles and other nefarious things. AIDS deaths have been dramatically reduced. Tuberculosis cases are down significantly. So is malaria. So is cancer. We're improving people's lives and the duration of their lives. That's fantastic. Violence trends. The global murder rate is falling. It's also falling for capital punishment. There's less genocide, and there's reduced military spending and smaller armies. All generally good things. More peace, greater prosperity. Nuclear arsenals are way down. which is good because all a nuclear war will do is kill us all. Fantastic improvements in work. The richer the country, the less people work. The average hours that people work are down from 2,150 a year to 1,750. Work-related deaths are down from 24.9 to 3.5 per 100,000 workers. I believe this is over the last roughly 30 years. That's amazing. That's an amazing number of lives that were people no longer being subject to risk at work. Now that's fantastic. Child labor globally is down. The service sectors where most workers will end up as agriculture and industry require fewer laborers due to increasing technology, and that's reducing child deaths, that's reducing work-related deaths because our improvements in technology are making things safer. That's great. And there's also been universal emancipation, the moral progress of society by eliminating slavery throughout the world. So slavery was in the world for thousands of years, and in basically 200 years it's been eliminated. Now, that's not entirely true. We still have sex trafficking. We all saw the horrible videos. Well, maybe we didn't all see them, but there were horrible videos going on inside of Syria and Yemen where there were literally auctions for people. That's saddening. But overall, globally, things are very much improved. Natural resources. We always worry that we're going to run out of natural resources because we're using fossil fuels. And we're also worried about land for agriculture. But there's more arable land available than the amount needed, and the amount of land needed is continually reduced because of technology that's improved, and because of technology not just in the seeds and crops themselves, but also in fertilization and also in watering. And that's great. There's also more conservation of lands. 15% of the earth is now protected. That's an area that's double the size of the United States. This is fantastic. And this shows that if we want to protect land, then this is the way to do it, is through prosperity. We can't just say, hey, sorry, everyone stay poor, we have to protect the land. That doesn't work. When Zimbabwe went through its massive devaluation in its currency because of the massive amount of money printing, they ate the animals in the zoo. If people are starving, in third world countries where people are hungry, I've seen this myself. I saw this in Fiji, where people were out on the reef collecting everything that they could find that might be worth something or that they could eat. When there's prosperity, people want that protected. When there's million-dollar homes around the rivers and the lakes, people want that water to be clean. And they will force government to do it. But if you don't have free press and freedom of speech, then it's hard to force your government to make sure that your water quality is clean. Also, that's improved too. Clean water is now available to more and more percentage of the world. Also great things. There's also less pollution, largely the result of businesses' constant effort to reduce energy costs. Energy costs meaning the amount they have to pay. So there's a natural incentive in improving things. And this has been true since the dawn of time, right? From the first time a person picked up a piece of wood and shaved the tip into a spear and threw it and killed something, right? To figuring out how to use fire to get more calories out of food. And then, hey, if a tip of a spear that I sharpened with a rock is good, how about flint on top of that? More efficient killing tool, right? And we've gotten more and more efficient. Well, businesses want to be more efficient. We act like businesses are these huge polluters that will only pollute and pollute for forever. Well, they don't want to use more energy if they don't have to, because that would lower their costs, which would improve their profits. So the profit motive actually helps create less pollution. Who would have thought? More oil has been found than is needed. The proven reserves are growing, and that's also true with natural gas. So we don't have this end of peak oil in terms of the supply available, but we're probably going to get into peak oil of demand required as our technology allows us to use less and use that energy to then create other energies that help offset and require us not to use that. Solar power has become a whole lot cheaper than it used to be. That's useful. It's not the whole solution, but it is useful. And I already covered the dematerialization. The declining consumption of materials and energy unit is because of our technology. Again, cell phones being the perfect example. Technology is improving. We have more access to electricity. More people have access to the internet. More people have access to mobile phones. And communication is cheaper than it's ever been. Remember long distance calls and how expensive they were? Now you can talk to anybody anywhere on the planet via the internet, basically for free. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So let's discuss the underlying causes of prosperity. And they, make no mistake, cover these throughout the book. Democracy being the first one, right? Freedom. So autocratic rulers, they say where resources are going to go, right? That doesn't mean that's the best use of those resources. That's just a determination by the state. When free markets pick where resources are used the best. When you have an autocratic leader, one person can start a war whenever they want to. We are going to fight these people, and it is so. When you have a democracy, Congress in the United States, for example, is supposed to declare war. And if American people don't like the war, then we can vote new people into Congress and end it. That's what democracy can do for you. Freedom drives prosperity as it gives people incentives and it gives them the ability to innovate. If you don't have freedom of expression, how do I improve what is wrong? I see what is wrong. I'm not allowed to speak out about it. How does it get better? It doesn't. And this is why I believe over the next 20 years, China is going to have a real problem in technological innovation. They can run a linear line off of what's already happened. But to really improve and come up with the best new technologies, you need free thought, free thinking, and free markets. Because if I'm not free to disagree with you, then the likelihood that we improve what's happening is low. Because we have to agree. I can't show you separate science that disagrees with that if I'm worried about getting my head chopped off. If I'm worried about being a dissenter, this isn't working. And then you go to jail because you said it didn't work, even though it didn't. But how do we improve? So democracy, freedom is essential to prosperity. It's very simple. This is why China's prosperity has come in the last 30 years as they've tried to open up their markets. Now, they haven't become completely free, but the parts that they have allowed to be free, parts that they have allowed to run under free market principles, have brought prosperity to their country because they realize that there's no way that a government knows best of what everybody wants, and where resources should be directed. There's no possible way that they could. Free speech, freedom of the press. Innovation is limited without freedom of expression. Ideas must be challenged to improve them. It's that simple. Free press also gives accountability to government. When we don't have a free press, we don't get government accountable. When government's not accountable, they redirect resources to unuseful things. Free markets. Free markets allow goods and services to move and be priced according to global demand. That has brought prosperity to everyone. It's that simple. Global trade is good for humankind. It allows us to sell what grows in our neighborhood to somebody who doesn't have that growing in their neighborhood. It allows me to get strawberries from places that grow strawberries because I don't live in a place that grows strawberries. That's a good thing for everybody. Everybody has the opportunity to buy what they want, and everyone has the opportunity to sell what they want to sell. Free markets, great for everybody. Free markets also provide incentives to improve technology. If you improve technology, you reduce the amount of energy required to make the same thing. That's good for humanity. And you have the ability to deploy that technology because you have a free market. Otherwise, if you have to ask the government's permission when you improve something, hey, we've made steel stronger. That allows us to make buildings taller, which means we need fewer buildings. But if you can't use it because the government says no, we only allow you to use the steel as it was made before, then no one prospers from this increase in technology. So these are simple things, but they're important. And last but not least, limited regulations. That's not to say that government has no role, but the government role needs to limit itself. So typically government regulations, for the most part, just increase costs and reduce the speed at which innovation happens, right? We need government regulations that support innovation, that support change. And what happens in almost every industrialized nation, America's not the same for this. In Europe, it's way, way, way worse, right? Is once entrenched, no one wants to change. And making people change is very difficult. Now, if markets are truly free, then something better comes along and people are allowed to change. And while the people who may not like the change can voice that opinion, they're not in control of whether or not that new technology comes to fruition or not. Now, imagine if over this last year they'd said Zoom's illegal. No. Zoom calls, no good. Well, everyone would have been stuck without being able to meet. We're supposed to talk on the phone and everyone get the same information and we could have video as well. No way. But government could decide that, right? That's under their power. So limited regulations in government. And most regulations in government come from crony capitalism. And by that I mean special interest groups who write the laws themselves, pay political contributions for their candidates to get elected, and then once elected, get them to invoke laws that help them and prevent future innovation. This is the downside. Now, we can limit that, and free press helps that, and freedom of speech helps that. But crony capitalism is where we're under right now, where companies have massive amounts of influence over government policy. And that is where we can do better. However, globally, things are a whole lot better. And I think one of the reasons we have this pessimistic view in the United States is that we do have this crony capitalism, or we're having less and less freedoms. Right? This last year, they took away freedoms left and right. Right? While we supposedly have our democracy, the last years looked more like totalitarianism, where these governors have decided that we can't leave our homes. That seems unconstitutional. They've said you can't practice religion as you want to. That's what the Bill of Rights says I can. Our freedom of speech has been taken away. All you have to do is say something that's now unwoke or ESG or unvaccine, and or be the former president of the United States, and now you can't talk anymore. That's not improving our democracy, that's reducing it. And this is where it's important to understand what brings prosperity. And thank you to Ronald Bailey and Marion Tupy for this 10 Global Trends book. Please go out and buy this book. Read this book. Talk to your friends about this book. It's important. This stuff is, it's so amazing. It really is. The improvements that we've made in the world. The lack of people living in extreme poverty now. All brought about for things that I intrinsically have believed in my entire life. That free markets, free people bring more prosperity because the incentive is there to do it. And when the incentive is there and the political system allows you to improve your life, people do improve their lives. And this is the proof of it. And what we need going forward are better democracies, more freedom of speech, more freedom of the press, more incentives to improve, and limited government regulations and control. That is what will bring us all prosperity. Thanks for listening. Please, please go buy this book, um, and give it to all your friends. Pass it out. You know, just understand that this is important, and you know, help educate the world in how good it really is, so that we can be more positive in our daily lives, understanding that things are improving for everybody overall. And while individual situations might not be where we want them to be, it is great to know that overall global prosperity is improving. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time. Please pass along to your friends and family. Thanks.